This is the view that Everett overlooks. This is Husky Stadium.
My first meeting with Ross Boyert at an LA hotel. Yes, he had information about the Sarawak Chief Minister Abdul Taib Mahmood, and yes, he wanted to share it.
Out of all of the congressmen and the senators I tried to contact on this, the only one that gave me any kind of credibility or listen at all was Tom Lantos. Everyone else brushed us off, didn't want to hear it.
It would mean a journey to San Francisco to find his papers. I'd been seeking Ross and his wife Johnny, former employees of Taib Mahmood, for weeks by then, tracing them eventually through their bankruptcy lawyers. They had taken Taib's company Sakti to court for unfair dismissal, exposing the chief minister's property dealings in the US. But they said the backlash had been ruthless. They'd lost their house, their American dream lifestyle, and were now destitute.
Since he had no retirement with the company, and the money that he was promised was not going to be given to him, the only retirement we had was our home.
You start to accept the fact that your life is destroyed and it's over. And the life that we had, the life that we knew, is over.
They were also living in fear after what they claimed to have been a 3-year campaign to discredit and harass them since the start of their case. Ross then spoke about his predicament in a way that has come back to haunt me.
The best analogy is if you put a plastic bag over somebody's head, eventually they're going to succumb to the lack of oxygen. And that's all.
It was a description of the manner of his own death just a few weeks later, with a plastic bag taped around his head.
You're under a lot of stress.
That's an understatement.
I was to watch the Boyerts as they fell over the edge of a precipice that had been placed in front of them. We stopped by their temporary accommodation in sunny California, lent to them to the end of the month.
Hey, little boy.
Just 2 weeks left to go.
My baby cakes.
Next, they would be living from their car, they said. But the car was soon a write-off, and their beloved dog would be found dying with a twisted neck.
So this is my new closet.
As they packed for our short trip, they told me about their descent into disaster.
Can we get it all in one, or?
No, I don't think so. Do you? You know, I need my hair.
Well, I'm not taking much. At 60 years old, we had no money to pay anybody to move us.
To help us move. None. I mean, none. At 91 years old, I took care of my mother. She lived in the house with us till, and then we had to put her out. And she had, at 91, we had to put her in a nursing home because of the stress of this, and because they were breaking in, and we never knew what was going down, and she was scared, and you know.
The Boyerts shared some of their recent past with me, a life they had enjoyed and thought would always be theirs, a comfortable neighbourhood, a beloved daughter who had always had the best. I learnt of their run of bad luck since they took up their lawsuit against Taib's son-in-law, Sean Murray, who had taken over the firm from the Chief Minister's son, Rahman Suleiman, in 2005, and who queried Boyert's employment terms. There was a countersuit by Sakti. Top lawyers sparked allegations of embezzlement, and private investigators were hired to question friends and colleagues, making it known that Boyert was a man under suspicion, undermining his chances of another job.
What happened to your friends?
Well,
They left.
They disappeared. They don't want that scrutiny. The one guy said to Ross, "Well, nobody can live on." Oh, well, only you, Ross. Nobody can live under that kind of interrogation.
Take your reputation, take your friends.
And you get a job. You know, when the minute that you get a job, they come in and say, "Oh, well, we're investigating them." And what are you supposed to say? No, believe me. You know, it's always the first mud that's slung first, and they just, I don't know, people just believe it.
Yeah, if you don't mind losing everything you've ever worked for, losing all your personal self-worth, your status, belief in who you were, and all the values that you held important have all been swept away.
But there was another aspect to the Boyerts' problems that seemed even darker and more worrying than the open pressure on their livelihoods. There had been hints of harassment, stalking, and intimidation. I would learn more of these incidents later, but first we had to get to the airport and on to San Francisco and the papers that would prove that Abdul Taib Mahmood, the modestly paid Chief Minister of Sarawak, is the owner of a multi-million-dollar international property empire.
I just think we just saw the guy from the picture follow us into the hotel. I mean, I'm amazed, but
And
he
then
looks
let's
like
do the,
exactly the same guy that we photographed in the lobby.
yes, and here's
Yeah.
a photograph of the
The
guy in the
moment I laid
lobby.
eyes on him,
Well, and he was so listening to what you had to say, and that's why I saw him and came in out of the cab.
For the next 24 hours as we worked together, I came to understand the fear and insecurity that have haunted Ross and Johnny since they started their case. We felt we were followed. A man whom the Boyerts had photographed on earlier occasions appeared to enter our hotel. Their mobile phone was reluctant to switch off, constantly turning itself back on.
This is 5 years, and you're just seeing a piece of the iceberg.
Our night was to be disrupted by strange small incidents, smells of gas, a jostling in the lift. It became clear that the Boyerts had become unable to distinguish between what might be genuine or imagined intimidation.
Like I said, if they'd have killed us, it would have been a blessing.
They also realised that this was probably the intended effect of the on-off harassment they had experienced. The couple weren't mad, but their numerous complaints about intimidation, which they had attempted to document with the police, had led some in authority to think they were. Now, 2 years after the case, I was preparing to expose the documentation that the Tybe family had always suspected that Ross still had. It made me fear that they could find themselves even more in harm's way. But we persevered with our plans to show how Sarawak's strongman Tybe Mahmood secretly owned property worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
this was your letter.
This is our letter, 17-page letter to him documenting what happened during the period from my hire to Sean coming in 2006. And this is all the support documents.
So he was the boss, basically.
Yes,
That's why you sent
yes,
this to
that's
him.
why I sent it to him, because he was the one who instructed Sean Murray to come in and take over SACD International.
How did you know that?
Sean told me. So when
Did
all
it
of
surprise you? Did it surprise you that that was the chief minister's role?
no, it's always been his role, always been in charge.
He's actually the owner of this company.
He is the owner of this company and all of these assets. The children who are the shareholders and the placeholders and the directors, it was always my understanding that they always reported back to him.
Ross showed me the figures behind the companies he ran. Catastrophic management by the Tybes had nearly caused the enterprise to collapse. However, Ross had struggled to keep the company afloat, and when he was sacked in 2006, the portfolio was worth in the region of $80 million. It included office buildings and homes in San Francisco, and also, astonishingly, one of the top-secret FBI facilities, the Abraham Lincoln Building in Seattle. Ross felt his relations had been good with Rahman.
He sent me these pictures after he relocated to Malaysia to show me what it looked like.
But now he felt betrayed. I'd wanted the couple to come back to Europe while we published their story, but in one of the break-ins, Ross had lost his passport. By the time it was renewed, they'd lost confidence in the project. Maybe I too could not be trusted. Also, they feared that in a settlement with SACD, they'd agree to return all papers and say nothing. They thought this would end the harassment, but they say it did not. They'd in fact kept their papers, Ross said, for protection.
Within 3 days of us leaving, the first thing they do is come back and say, we can't find the records. Now the records for the operation of these companies had been in the same place for 12 years. They were well known, and they couldn't find them. Okay, now the only thing that prevented the destruction of those records was the fact that I also had a duplicate set of the records, which I said at the time, well, it's a good thing I've got copies. And then magically they found the records. Who's ready for that? Who's ready for someone to come in and be prepared to possibly throw out all the financial records and start accusing you of any number of things?
But this interview was weeks later. The situation changed when Johnny called me in July to say that Ross had been taken to hospital after a suicide attempt. He had taken pills, crashed his car, and left a note to say his wife and daughter would be safer without him. Johnny wanted my help because the hospital had locked him in a mental ward with suspected paranoid schizophrenia, because he had come round saying that a Malaysian leader had been trying to destroy him. I returned to the US, where I was able to visit Ross and see his wife in the locked centre.
My recollection was being taken out of my car, thrown to the ground, kicked in the face, and then someone's foot grinding my face into the gravel. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital and being told that I had been in an automobile accident. And after that, it's just been going through a recovery period. So I've got 2 bruises on my arm, which one of which is right here, another large one up here.
When you first told them that you didn't think it was an accident, that something had been deliberately done to you, how did they respond here in the hospital?
They didn't find it as a believable statement, okay?
The hospital
The
didn't?
hospital did. But they didn't know the background either.
They thought he was crazy.
What did they tell you?
That they thought he was crazy, delusional, crazy, that there was some kind of a prime minister who had been hurting him, and they thought he was crazy, basically.
It didn't surprise me, I guess, okay, because these people live in a cocoon. They've never had any experience like this.
And why would they?
And why would they?
We told Ross such memories of attack might well have been caused by the pills he had taken, and he wouldn't be released if he kept up this talk of aggression towards him. Like the local police where he'd filed so many reports, the hospital felt more comfortable with the more likely cause of severe depression. We got Ross out to debrief in more congenial surroundings, and the Boyerts agreed that this time they should do a full interview and give me all their papers. Finally, I would get their whole story. They began with details of the alleged intimidation they had suffered. They said to suppress information about Tide Mahmood's unaccountable property wealth.
What did it do to you psychologically, Johnny? Were you frightened?
Oh, course.
Did you think that they would take another step, that it would...
Absolutely. One time, Kristen was driving back down and called her on the phone and said, "Are you still breathing?" My nerves, I can't stand, I'm just so wound up at times, even thinking about it, I can't stand to have somebody touch me. My nerves just feel like they're on.
And when you turned for help,
Nobody.
why not?
I think they all thought we were crazy.
Well,
Or they
and
didn't want to help, or I don't know.
it's designed to break you down. It's designed to get you to the point where you're so discredited that nobody would believe you, okay? And so we have a great deal of credibility. We filed a suit against these folks, and I think they did their best to discredit us and to keep that out of the public eye. I mean, how do you describe to somebody that you're watching TV, somebody has a line on the TV, and then it's played back to you on your telephone?
At first it was really scary. I'd be sitting there and Ross would be away and they would take a big brick or a big something and they wouldn't break the window, but they'd throw it at the window.
Night after night there'd be a car sitting out in front of our home idling, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, sometimes at 1. We had our home broken into a number of times. We have felt very strongly that our telephones and our computer were all tapped and all that information looked at.
We have had so many nails in our tires. We'd come out and there would be 3 of the 4 tires would have nails in them.
Creepy parts about the break-ins is that nothing was taken, which was very worrisome, but all of our pictures were accessed. We would find these photographs in just piles, all mixed up. It
Wow.
breaks you down in a way that, unless you've experienced it, it's hard to describe.
Yeah, it really
Okay,
is.
you can take a confident, caring, loving
Right.
situation and turn it into a stressful, doubting situation.
Where every stranger might not be a stranger.
We equated it to just sheer terrorism.
They called me on the phone and said if I would divorce Ross, then they would leave me and my daughter alone.
Another tragic incident had shaken the couple since I'd seen them last. Their little dog had come to harm while they'd been out. They found it with a bent neck and dying. The vet felt a possible congenital defect had come into play, but the Boyerts were beyond being able to see anything but foul play. They'd lost their ability to decide what was real and what was not.
I think they were taking a great deal of pleasure in what they were doing to us and watching the utter destruction of my career and my family. We're talking about an extensive, expensive operation. You sue me and we'll show you what will happen to your family and you. You bring out the truth and you won't survive.
We published Ross's information at last, finally linking Tide Mahmood with the foreign investments of his family's property companies.
Freeze Tide's assets now!
Freeze Tide's assets now!
Add Mahmoud of Sarawak, stop corruption now!
But Ross Boyert did not survive. Just weeks later, Johnny called me to say that he had lost his life in an LA motel room. He had been found with a bag taped around his head in a very rare form of suspected suicide. This film is a tribute to him and his determination to present his information to the people of Sarawak.